Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're going to be talking to Chaim Mazal, who is the SVP of Technology and the VP of Security Information and CISO at Kandji. Kandji is an Apple device management solution, and we're going to be talking with Chaim about the current threat landscape, best practices for CISOs, and probably some other things. But first off, let's say hi to Chaim. Chaim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, thank you for taking time to join us. Whereabouts are you?
I'm located in Chicago.
Chicago. So, did you guys get summer yet? Because we haven't out here.
Yeah, we're about 3.5 days in. So far so good.
All right, we had the wettest May on record, and we're on track for the wettest June on record. So it's not a good time. Well, some people like the rain, but yeah.
I'm not one of them. So
yeah, me neither. So hey, why don't you give us a little background in terms of your role, because when we talk about CISOs, some CISOs are really focused on the company security, some or more on the product or platform security. Where do you sit?
Totally. So I'm extremely focused in general. I have been throughout my career on engineering, and it's building in security solutions to the product, but also while securing the organization. So I think I took some of those experiences when I came on to Kandji, and I said, they brought me on to be the CISO and secure the actual organization. But after having conversations and working very closely alongside the engineering org, they asked me to actually take over engineering. Before I was at Kandji, I was at ActiveCampaign, and I worked alongside the CTO there, Tony Newcomb, and I helped build security products within the platform to help enable our customers to better secure their PII and their information. So having some of that experience of generally leading engineering teams and creating security product as well as securing the organization, it seemed like a optimal fit at Kandji. So we're building out some incredible tooling for endpoint and device management, as well as helping to secure endpoint device management, as well as building out a cutting edge security program to best safeguard our customers' data. So.
Well, definitely want to talk about your MDM solution here in a bit. But before, let me ask you, what do you think is more challenging, securing or acting as a CISO for the company environment versus product?
I think they both present two unique sets of challenges. Obviously, making sure that you're ahead of the curve and you have complete and total visibility over your assets and your organization is paramount to being successful as a CISO in order to secure your organization, right? And also, building security product has its own unique set of challenges, but doing both simultaneously is pretty difficult. So I'm extremely fortunate that I've been able to build and hire a world-class security team here at Kandji, and really have some extraordinary individuals alongside me, people like Dom Lombardi, who came from Klaviyo. I have people like Gordon Young, who was previously at Postmates. We have top tier talent that is effectively helping curate and build out a world-class security program. But I think product is fun. Securing the organization is also fun, but takes a much greater amount of detail. You can't be asleep behind the wheel.
So can you give us some examples in terms of the differences?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with product. So product, right? It's thinking about innovation. It's thinking about the future. It's thinking about the direction and trends within the industry. You're really thinking about customer problems and how you're going to, provide and innovate solutions around them in long term. So it's really thinking about where the industry is today, right? Problems and how they're presenting themselves and long-term solutions for you to solve. When you're thinking about the actual, organization that you're securing, you're watching things evolve in real time, second by second, minute by minute. So, your threat intel feeds, introduction of asset, your evolving landscape. Those are things that are a constant pulse. So the ability for you to stay on top of your organization as it continues to scale and grow at a high rate requires much more attention to detail. So I think the product obviously has a lot of attention to detail, but a lot of it is like very forward thinking, very anticipating the direction. I think most CISOs who are securing an organization would only hope to be in that that space where they can anticipate instead of unfortunately being dealing things retroactively. It's very hard to be able to secure a high growth organization at speed while being able to enable the business units to be successful for the innovation. But yeah, so one is a lot of thought leadership, and the other one is a lot of practical, hands-on deck, nose to the grindstone, making minute-by-minute, play-by-play decisions.
It's funny. I've been approached from time to time with CISO opportunities and like, hey, we think you'd be great for this role, and I'd like, no, I wouldn't be, because I want to sleep at night, and I'm a person who tends to worry about stuff like my job or the company's future. You know what I mean? So there just seems to be a lot of, now I know I'm sure you feel really good about the work you're doing, but for me there seems to be a lot of potential downside compared to the potential upside, because you do your job, things go on day to day, and people are like, yeah, okay, well, everything looks like it's working. But if you don't do your job, the noise to like calm ratio is just huge, right? So I total hats off, respect for you for doing that. Let me ask you, on the company side, what are your major concerns, or in terms of threat vectors and things that you need to, hey, we've got to check this box and we got to be aware of these things?
Absolutely. I think something that's on most CISOs' minds, just because the general landscape and the trends that we've seen over the last couple of years or so since the beginning of the pandemic, has really been around the supply chain, right? Really being able to hammer down and validate how you're pulling in technologies into your organization, the potential blast radius and impact they may have, and how you go ahead and provide an additional layer of comfort to the business, knowing that you've made that decision, right, with risk in mind, right? It's very easy to want to use the latest and greatest technologies. It's very, easy to go ahead and want to pull in, certain open source software packages, because guess what? The development team wants to do that, and that's how we're going to win. But being able to provide, guardrails and a framework around how we make those decisions so they're repeatable and it's not subjective, I think is something that's extremely critical and important in today's day and age. So from my perspective, making sure that who you do business with, right, is just as important as you actively locking down your resources and assets on behalf of your customers.
So how do you do that? I mean, you could say, hey, this company, they've got a good name. They've got, how do you, you must have to kind of peek under the hood and do some type of evaluation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's evolved a little bit more than in days past. It used to be like, hey, can we see a SOC 2 Type 2 report? You have ISO 27001, and you get the reports, and maybe you'd have an analyst come over it real quick and be like, okay, this is great, thumbs up. I think there's a lot more scrutiny applied. So now within these frameworks and with these in compliance, you're really having to look at certain subsets of information, like who are the subservice, organizations that your vendors are using, right? Like, what are their implications? What happens, if something were to go wrong with one of their service providers, right? Even from a business continuity standpoint, but effectively from a breach, like who is that third and fourth party who might potentially be impacted via customer PII, right? All of these things are extremely instrumental to think about. And then also when you're able to present that full picture, right, to be able to put it in a risk matrix and have detailed conversations with your team around like, hey, maybe this isn't the best solution. Maybe there's an alternative provider that gets us 90% of the way there. And maybe they have a little bit more scrutiny that's going to better safeguard our customers and data. I think that's how people are choosing vendors in this day and age. It's not just necessarily like, hey, this is the leader in the space, this is the brand. Like, if you're not doing things to safeguard your supply chain and it potentially puts our customers at risk, that's a no-go for us.
Okay, I think that's a really good observation there. Let me ask you about I guess just the human vector, in terms of people clicking on malware, phishing emails, etc. What do you do to make sure your people are aware of what they should be doing and shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big thing that I've believed in from very early on, and it led from a couple negative experiences. In my career as being part of a security team that went about things the wrong way, is really through education and through positive reinforcement and building security as a culture. Some people are going to disagree with me, but I'm not a huge fan of sending out phishing campaigns and then forcing required training for individuals who click on things 2, 3, 4 times, right, and so on and so forth. It's really about making security part of everyone's responsibility. And how do you do that? It starts from the top down as part of a culture, right? I'm very fortunate and lucky at Kandji. Obviously security is top of mind for our CEO, our CPO, the entire executive leadership team. So it's something that's part of our talk track. It's something that we actively express from the top down, providing unique training, and then also supplementing our IT and security teams with the appropriate tooling to be able to have eyes on deck and have the appropriate visibility. And then when we start seeing trends, to start sending out proactive emails, right, to our internal users and saying like, hey, these are some things we're seeing it from this area. It's like, hey, we went ahead and we've mitigated this risk for you on your behalf, but if you see something in the future, please call it out in public channels. Like, let's discuss it, let's make it a part of all of our responsibility here at Kandji. It's been very successful so far. So again, having secure email gateways and things like that are great, but really having people to socialize, to message what we're seeing, that traffic, and really to make it part of our organizational culture has been instrumental.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's still a lot of organizations where your average person just assumes that there's a guy somewhere in the IT department who's going to keep the company safe, and security is not really my job. I'll just and then there are organizations that they'll do the requisite training once in a while, and people are like, okay, I get it. But there are other organizations where they say, you know what, security, profitability, it's at the end of the day, it's everybody's responsibility. Our reputation, it's everybody's responsibility. And I would go on to argue that even as individuals and consumers in the world that we live in, security is your responsibility. I have my children, they are digital natives, and they come to me with all kinds of stuff. Like, look at this scam, look at this. They're hyper aware of this, and so I think that's. It's unfortunate that we have to be, but it's definitely something that we need to work towards. So it's great to hear that you guys have that kind of culture. Let me ask you, in terms of MDM solutions or mobile device management solutions, and I know you're focused on Apple devices, but in general, what are some key must-haves, and then some future trends for feature in development?
Yeah, so I think one-touch deployments, like as we go ahead and we have remote and hybrid work, and we're watching organizations expand globally. It's super important for IT teams and for security teams to be able to get the appropriate devices to the appropriate team members and allow them to have everything they need up front, day one, minute one, right? I open up my laptop, I automatically have my credentials populated. I'm asked to go ahead and reset my credentials. I'm asked to go ahead and integrate with my company's SSO, and then boom, I automatically have my profile that's aligned to my business unit right at work, whether I'm in finance, right, whether I'm in technology, whether I'm in the people organization. I have everything I need to be successful on my day-to-day, and it all just works behind the scenes, and I don't have to have any in-depth detail and insight to how that happens. I don't have to ping the IT team. I don't have to ask security like, hey, do I have all my permissions set? And then on the inverse of that, the IT team and the security teams, they need this to work out of the box, right? So they can focus on the more important part of their job, and that is serving internal consumers and making sure that we can show a downtrend in threats across the organization. So I know, historically help desk has been like a huge part of organizations, right? But our idea here, I think for MDM in general, right, is to make it as low touch as possible, so it just works. It just works out of the box. And at Kandji, we believe doing that through automation and orchestration, and being able to have workflows that make it very, very easy for IT professionals and security professionals to be able to deploy, management to devices and get real-time telemetry and feedback that will allow them to better make decisions on how to deploy and safeguard their fleet going forward.
The one-touch deployment is awesome and it's huge. I mean, it wasn't very long ago that everybody would provision a device, would go to the IT team and they would sit on it for 3 or 4 hours or however long it took, and you'd be pulling your hair out waiting for the darn thing to get ready, and it was just taking up so much time. And there's every time you do something manually, there's an opportunity for human error as well, right? So it's amazing. There's still, I think, because I've spent like 20 years off and on in Asia. In the U.S., I think with most large organizations, they have some type of MDM solution that allows them to get that service. But there are a lot of still SMEs out there that are still doing it the manual way, or they're outsourcing it to their local IT support company that is maybe doing it manually or maybe has some kind of solution. But overseas, I'm talking specifically about like Japan, Korea, it's still a kind of a high touch process. So there's a huge upside, I think, in terms of time saving and everything. What other types of features like should if you're in the market for an MDM solution, should you be looking at?
Yeah, I think one, it's really that comprehensive package, the totality, and I think that's what you alluded to a little bit, like the compliance aspect, making sure that you can have standardized configurations across unique working groups for organizations is essential. You have to have that, right? You also have to be able to have those unique data sets that essentially let your IT team and your security team know how devices are being operated, how they're being utilized, let you track improvements across, like how you go ahead and
give me some examples of the signal or the telemetry that you're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the unique things that we have in Kandji is we have something called library items. So library items is essentially a suite and catalog of applications that you can go ahead and assign to different blueprints. Blueprints are what we call our templates for different business groups, right? So you can go ahead and track usage over certain blueprints, right? Active user groups, and what actual software they're using as a whole, and then it'll help you iterate against your process. So if you see that there's a suite of software that's being regularly used across your finance department and you're not pre-configuring it and deploying it across that suite of assets, you can go ahead and proactively do that going forward, and making sure that every time you onboard a new individual that they already have the suite of software and it's what they need. And you can also do that with excluding things too. If you have sets of software that you believe is being used by certain parts of the organization, maybe it's not great, so you can go ahead and exclude those as well. I think other unique things that you can see is effectively we have something called auto apps, which allows you to deploy instantaneously and manage versioning of major applications that you use, right? So effectively, if you know that everyone is using Zoom, right, and Zoom has updates and there might be security updates and patching implications, you can set up on a cadence that every time there's a new major version release, that through auto apps, you go ahead and deploy that unique set of functionality or to your different devices. And a lot of things, again, that we're seeing also too across the general board is how the IT teams can make improvements slowly and iteratively, so it can be as low touch as possible. You don't want people requesting software. You don't want people asking you to update configurations. So the way that you have the ability to look at the pieces move across the board proactively allows you to go ahead and make long-term decisions that automate, right, all of those outcomes for your team on a consistent basis. So I think like having all of these unique data sets of how people are using devices, what software they're using, things that they need to be successful, and allow you to automate and orchestrate all of those outcomes is very important too. And we also have certain things that we see about alongside the security aspect too, as far as data, right? We have a lot of interesting things in the works right now. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. But we
come on, man.
I know. We believe that there's a series and sequence of pillars that allow end users and allow IT teams and security professionals to be successful as far as the administration and moderation and creating a comprehensive picture around their assets and their fleets. And it's something that we're working very hard on currently, and it's It's in the works. We're going to have some big conversations around it here.
We'll have to have you back on maybe a few months down the road. So let me ask you this: in terms of BYO devices, what can you do and what can't you do?
Yeah, so I think it's up to the organization. I think there's a lot of great tools now that effectively allow people to do BYOD if they want to, and provide a lot of safeguards around an organization. We see a lot of stuff with zero trust, right? Like, can you use your own device? You can have your own cert, and guess what? You want to use your things, and you want to authenticate to the network, and you want to use SSO, and you want to have least privilege access. Like, we can do that. We can facilitate things. It used to be no, right? Like, the answer was no uniformly across the board. Like, you can't bring your stuff, right? If it's not an approved device, it's not going to happen. And now there's a lot of companies who've approached things differently. Like, if you have your own device, we can onboard it without actively managing it and feel very comfortable 99.9% of the way, and it allows organizations to have flexibility. And then there's the other point of like, hey, you know what? We're not going to allow you to bring your own laptop. We're going to have cert-based, authentication. But if you want to use your device for a certain segment of, SSO authenticated apps where you have FMFA, like we feel good about that. That's okay. And these things, might be cloud hosted and based apps, but it's not going to be things that are going to lead to production environments or customer data or things like that. So I think there's diagrams of like, data classification models. How comfortable would we feel giving what level of access where? And I think that's been a huge trend that we've seen in the security industry, over the last, 5 years, is that it's yes, but like, we're going to find a way to make it work, and we'll make it more flexible so you can be successful within your role, but we're also going to remove risk from the organization. I'll give a great example, like having access to things like ServiceNow or Jira or Confluence or something, or Zendesk, right? So people can do their job and be able to check on tickets or status updates or things for the phone might be totally acceptable for an organization, right? Being able to have access to AWS, and remotely logging in to a staging environment might totally not be, right? So nuanced conversations happen across the board, but I think there's a much higher level of receptiveness towards a certain level of BYOD that hasn't existed in the past.
What, because Kandji is an Apple device, MDM,
Yep.
and how do you play alongside? I mean, or with other MDM solutions? If an organization has a mix between Windows devices and Apple, how do you manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our goal is to be the world's best Apple MDM solution. So really, Mac OS is our bread and butter, and as we're seeing this growth and transformation within the corporate world, right, we're seeing more and more on a daily basis, corporations and big technology companies adopt Apple devices as a whole. I think there was a statistic that said by 2024, 34% of the Fortune 500 will at least have a 51% Mac OS blueprint, which means that, and so I think the big push behind this has been technology organizations.
Is that when you say Mac OS, is that primarily phones, or is it also? Maybe I said that wrong. Are we talking? You're talking about what am I looking at here? Laptops? Or are we talking a mix or everything?
No, we're talking laptops. We're just talking about
Mac OS.
Mac,
not iOS, just the Mac OS.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, that's impressive. Yeah.
If you look historically, I haven't worked in an organization that did not primarily use Apple laptops in over 10 years. All modern, technology organizations, I think it started just with the ones that were, developer centric. Most developers want to use MacBooks. And so most technology organizations have a majority Mac OS footprint. And so I think as those companies,
I can think of one technology company that doesn't.
Yeah, totally.
They're here in Redmond, Washington.
No, absolutely. Again, I think I think there were statistics around privately owned companies. So we're going to say anywhere from seed, to series,
Sure.
F or whatever, that the overall landscape within, modern, pre-IPO technology companies is something like 80% use MacBooks.
Makes sense.
And when those companies IPO and they're super high growth, and companies like I mean, you name it. Look at some of the big ones in recent history, like Snowflake or like you know, Sentinel-1, right? Like, right. So we're watching these companies now that are going effectively growing in to the Fortune 500, and they're taking their device of choice, which is Apple MacBooks, with them. So we're watching this huge, transformation and convergence up market. And I honestly do think that MacBooks for organizations are inherently more secure by default. Apple is a security first organization who built out frameworks. Obviously, part of that is that it's less part of the market share, so there's less active malware that's developed for it and things like that. But also that it's easier to manage, it's more cost effective long term, and so we're watching this transformation across organizations. And so I think for us, it doesn't matter what other devices that an organization has. We want to make sure that their Apple devices are covered and that they can have the best and easiest possible outcomes as far as managing their fleet and having real, time insights into how they're being used and how to effectively manage them in a better capacity.
So what would you say? I mean, that all makes sense, and actually, I'm kind of, I was initially very surprised by the numbers, but it totally makes sense in terms of technology companies are the fast growing companies, and most technology companies, they start off with developers who want to be on their MacBooks, right? And I get that. But what would you say to a customer that says, hey, we've got this Microsoft Intune with Autopilot, which allows us to effectively manage both types of devices. Obviously, it's probably more mature with Windows devices, but what's your discussion in terms of like, what, maybe you need something a little bit more focused or specialized? How does that go?
Yeah, and this is a great use case. So I have a very close friend who's a security leader at a pretty cool healthcare startup, and this healthcare startup is effectively all executives from Microsoft. So their entire stack is in Azure. Most of their footprint is actually Windows-based devices, but they have a good percentage, probably about 1/3 of their laptops are Mac OS. And I had some conversations with this good friend of mine. We're having just some general friendly banter, and he lets me know that, hey, like, our RT organization is seriously looking at Kandji. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. Like, I know that you're heavy in Microsoft. Your executive leadership team is ex Microsoft. I know that you use Microsoft Intune. You told me, like, can you tell me what it is that makes Kandji compelling for you? And it's like, yeah, so here we believe that we use the best tool for the job, regardless of what that tool is. And so, yes, we do believe that Intune is the best for Windows devices, but there are shortcomings that we experience with Mac OS. And if Kandji is the best tool for the job, then that means we need to use that as well. So they onboarded us, about 6 months ago. So far, I've heard nothing but glowing reviews. They're very happy with the value that we provide to that certain segment of devices within the organization. Great organizations want to use the best tools for the best job, regardless of what their ideologies might be as far as technology in the world. So yes, we most definitely play nicely in the ecosystem with other device management solutions.
Awesome. I think that's a great example. Let me ask you, let's take a step back. If you had to give one piece of advice to a new CISO, what would it be? Don't do it.
Yeah, no, it's over-index on visibility. You can't secure what you're unaware of, right? So even if you're within the life cycle of your first 3, 6, 9 months, you feel like you're taking an incredibly large amount of time to be able to make sure that you can have a full view of your organization, the value is going to be exponential going forward, right? Because always those things that we don't have insight to, it's always the processes that we were unaware of. It's always, the shadow IT that we were uninformed of that leads to significant risk and problems down the road. And as you're going through these visibility exercises, like be unrelenting with filling out your risk register. Make sure that if you see something, you identify it, you're adding it, you're having active conversations around it as you proceed forward. But I really think, again, you can't manage the risk if you're unaware of the risk, and that really means having candid conversations with other parts of your organization, being open and friendly, and making partnerships across the board. So when people do encounter something, they feel comfortable bringing it to you and having conversations around it, because that's really the key to the role, is building relationships that have long-term, lasting, positive impact on reducing the risk for the organization.
I think that's some awesome advice. Let me just ask one follow-up question on there. Do you this process of discovery, is this a manual process driven by conversations, or are there any tools, network scans, et cetera, that you can use to kind of give you some insights?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a mixture of both. I think there's a lot of things that tools can't identify that you have, conversations are required. I think in most organizations, you have people who have a lot of legacy and historical knowledge about how things happen, processes, and certain intricate points within the business. And I think uncovering a lot of those things happens just through the natural process of conversation, of collaboration. But I think there are some tools that are essential. I definitely have a set of tools and a set of relationships that I feel very strongly about, because they solve problems and things that I've been able to actively contribute to as far as from a product perspective. So on the cloud-based asset side, one of the things that helps me sleep better at night is Lacework. So Lacework is a cloud observability tool and platform. So basically what they do is indicate and alert you on anomalous activity that might be taking place across your assets, based on creating a baseline of activity. They also allow you to manage your vulnerabilities and configurations across the board. It's extremely helpful and useful. Obviously, another thing that is extremely essential is being able to understand your data classifications, data workflows, implications across a data governance standpoint, as far as any implications as far as GDPR, CCPA, things of that nature. So I'm a very big fan of a tool called Satori. Satori Cyber helps you effectively manage and identify all of your different data classes. And then it allows you to create workflows to provision access to users across your data fabric, something like Snowflake or Databricks or Amazon Redshift, to different user segments within your environment. So let's say that you're a business analyst and you need access to something that has GDPR implications. So what we'll do is it'll automatically provide you that access while scrubbing any non-essential data that removes any of the implications of you having access to it. So it's basically a data enablement tool and a data tagging and structuring tool. It's been something that's been a game changer for me. I've been using it for the last 3 years. It's a great team. I think it's really revolutionizing, the data operations and data security space.
That's some great advice. I'm just kind of reflecting back on this relatively short conversation. I think we're about 35 minutes in, and you've already shared a lot of valuable information and best practices for CISOs out there. So thank you for that. Hey, Chaim, last question. If anybody wants to get any additional information for you, obviously they can go to your website. Any plans for any industry events, anything like that coming up in 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kandji is going to be at Black Hat in Las Vegas this year, in August, and I will be there as well. And I will also be at DEF CON this year as usual. And so we'll be hosting some parties and some events and some things like that. So, I'd love for people to come say hi and, have some interesting conversations.
Awesome. Well, hey, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Like I said, there's a ton of useful information there. Thanks so much for your time, Chaim.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.